When working with questions built in the Query Builder, Metabase has all the information about all the query pieces, so you can connect dashboard filters directly to any columns in the query. Check out our intro tutorial for dashboard filters for more on that. For native queries, like SQL, it's more complicated. Because Metabase doesn't parse the native queries, it doesn't know which columns you're using in the query, so it doesn't know how to connect filters to it. But you can add variables into your SQL questions first, and then Metabase will be able to connect dashboard filters to these variables. Metabase has two types of variables for SQL questions: field filters and basic SQL parameters. Check out our in-depth tutorials for each type if you aren't familiar with them, but let's talk about how both of these types are handled on the dashboards. Let's create a question first. I'm going to look at the sample accounts table with filters for plan and created date. I make plan a field filter and connect it to the plan column. So even though Metabase doesn't know what's going on inside my SQL query, I'm explicitly telling it that I'm using a specific database column, and Metabase will know what type and values it should be using for filtering, just like if this was in the Query Builder. I do the same for created at date, field filter, and connect to column. All right, let's save the question and add it to a dashboard. On a dashboard, I'll add a filter. Let's pick category. Metabase will give me an option to connect it to the plan field filter in my SQL question. That's because I told Metabase that this filter is connected to the plan column, and Metabase knows that the plan column is a category type column, so category filter makes sense for it. If I use this filter, I get the values from the column in this nice drop-down. It also behaves intelligently if I don't select anything. Same with created filter. I add a new date filter, get the option to connect it to the created field filter because that filter is connected to a date column, and as a result, I have this smart date picker. I can even change how it looks. I can edit the dashboard, go to filter settings, and change it to, say, month and year. There we go. So as long as you're filtering on an actual column from a table, you can and should use field filters, because then Metabase will know what data to search and what kind of filter to use on the dashboard. But sometimes you can't connect a filter to a specific column. For example, if you're filtering results over CTE or a union. In this case, you can use basic SQL variables. Let's create the same question, accounts filtered by plan and date, but with SQL variables instead of field filters. You see that the syntax is different, and I have something equals filter. I choose explicitly that my plan is a text filter and created at is a date filter. Basic SQL variables can only insert a single value into the query, and they don't know anything about the underlying data, so I have to tell Metabase what the types are. I also have to cast the timestamp to date to account for the fact that the date filter only substitutes dates, but my data has times in it. So now I'll save and also add it to the same dashboard. Okay, I go back to my dashboard filter and I try to connect it to my new question. I have the option to connect it to my plan variable, but it's not because this filters on a plan column. I only get this option because I told Metabase that this basic parameter contains text, so it knows that it can try to connect any text type dashboard filter to it. As for the date filter, I can't connect it to this card at all right now. Remember, I picked the month and year widget for this field filter before, but SQL parameters can only accept one value, not a whole month of them. So I need to change the filter type to single date. And then I can connect it to the SQL parameter. Now I can only select one value for the filter, and in fact I actually have to type out the value, even though it's connected to a field filter on the other card. I can specify drop-down values and filter settings, but I can no longer use the column to populate these values automatically. I do the same for the created date filter. I can only use a single date in this filter. So this is two different ways to use filters in SQL questions. So to summarize, to connect dashboard filters to SQL questions, you need to add SQL variables into the question. There are two types of SQL variables, field filters and parameters. When you are filtering on a real database column, you can use a field filter in your query connected to that column, and then you get full functionality of Metabase dashboard filters. Otherwise, you add a basic parameter into the query that works through simple substitution, and you can still kind of connect those filters to dashboard filters, but behavior of those filters will become limited and only allow you to select a single value to filter on. See you next time.